Hello again, and welcome to episode 2 of the MasterClass series, where I go back and review some older RCT2 parks that are some of the best. Today we look at Busch Gardens Asia by Robbie92. This is a New Element Spotlight winner and one of the highest scoring parks of all time, despite challenges with the object limit and being sort of kind of unfinished. But everything comes together really well, and the park is really great. It's excellent looking architecture, good ride design, all around. So let's dive right on in. As the name implies, these are all Asian themes throughout the different areas. According to the README, this Busch Gardens Park is set in California, and there was a real Busch Gardens Park in California, in Los Angeles, by the Budweiser Brewery before that park closed down, leaving us with just the two Busch Gardens parks that remain, both Tampa and Williamsburg. So, here we have Istanbul, which is the first kind of opening area of the park. We've got our nice tram here coming in, and then our ticket booths here, lots of little domes. Nice little crenellation here on the ticket booth. We have both an entrance and an exit area, which is a little bit rare, but I've seen plenty of parks that have that, where you use a different way to get in as to get out. Seems a little maybe inefficient to me, but realistic anyway. I like the light paving here, kind of scattering within the brick, make it look a little bit worn, a little bit almost sandy texture to it. So heading on in, we have these nice awnings over top using the cable car up and over top for the sky ride. Actual cable car here as the first ride that you get when you come in, with some really nice tower pylon structures. We'll catch that a little later as we keep moving around. Big theater here, nice sized building, but it's hidden well with the Main Street buildings here that kind of bring the overall scale down so it doesn't look quite so massive. You have a big wall here on the front, but the nice thing is there's the theming above the area where you'd see it. All this is down below in the back areas where you wouldn't be able to catch all that. But nice detailing in the front, guest services, that kind of thing. You got your gift shop here on the side with a bunch of different entrances that I kind of like, and then I like this arcade of columns here on the way out, and then this little snack stand here as you head on out that way. Inside, we've got this island building here that includes the sky ride, has this great little tower here on the front, and really that's the first thing that you see when you come in straight ahead. So it's got this good looking architecture, a nice seat wall around here with some landscaping, pathway broken up with a lot of these planters. Nice kind of irregular shapes, but really good landscaping. I love the sunken trees as the large bushes. I think that's a really good strategy to get big bushes in without having to worry about some smaller things clumping together. Used to advantage all throughout here, including the picnic pavilion area here on the side. And then the survey markers also out here for the new ride, which we'll see is Tajin in the back. There's some track already here in the back of the park. Good use of the strollers here with the Millennium Flyer GCI trains. Good look there. Continue around. I mean, architecturally, this park is stunning. It's got really great true-to-life architectural styles in here, and then some really great placemaking as well. Loving this little space looking out over the water here. You can see, little bits here and there where the object limit may have become a factor, kind of like this empty little planter here in the middle, and then just some, on occasion, little details that are missing. But the nice thing is that on the whole, it doesn't look totally unfinished. It still looks good. So we've got nice couple more buildings here, a little kind of bizarre almost throughout this space. And then our first actual ride beyond the sky ride, we've got this Zamperla Roto Shake, which is a pretty rare ride, especially in real life. These days. I don't believe there's many or any of these running anymore. the side-to-side movement, and you have to watch a little bit out for these canopies here. There may be some conflict there. A nice fountain in front. It almost feels like this is a setup for a topspin over the water, but instead it is this ride, but it is well done. Nice use of track texture here for the vertical column, and then the main arm support here as well. It's looking good. Then over here we've got the Thai twist as we head into Southeast Asia as the first of the areas. Some nice theming here. We've got some really great theming on Angkor River Rapids. This has got that sort of Angkor Wat look to it. Awfully busy in here with this cool diagonal drop underneath of the queue line here, and then wrap around in sort of a trench almost into this enclosed area here. And back to the station up at the top of the lift hill. I think what I like about this is there's just so much building to it. So clearly this interior has some type of interior show scene of sorts in there, and then the queue line itself wraps on top of the whole thing. Got these great colored canopies here with the bobsled track, and some really great use of the 1K ruins for rock work, and then lots of little waterfalls. Right here, just kind of like we saw in the Starpoint Rapids ride as well. This kind of one spot where it peaks out at the pathway, and then you have this great little tableau of fountain and waterfall and everything else wrapping around it. Also some great little details here, like this fallen tree that's over top of the Rapids ride as you dive down and go underneath of that. Good start to the ride itself. So not a super long ride, but it doesn't really have to be. It covers ground pretty well, and it's reasonably compact too. It's often pretty hard to get a Rapids ride as tight as you really kind of want it to be sometimes. They tend to be a little sprawling at best, but anyway, lots of great details here. Little cantina here, and then these little carts throughout scattered on the pathway are really, really well done. Very well put together. Over here, we've got a little show area. Super cool awnings here with the kind of angled wood pieces and the overlapping triangles and the two colors. Looks really nice. Better than kind of just the standard awning, I think. It covers well, but it still looks sort of kind of architectural. Looks nice. Here we have what I think references the hospitality house at Busch Gardens, Tampa, with a couple of different roof patterns here, sort of the almost octagonal shaped roof here. Good look overall, and then this seating plaza that gives a spectacular view of the two loops here on Naga, which we'll get to once we wrap around to the station. We split the path on this spot right here where the coaster dives down and back up again. Good look there, kind of 360 view of the ride. And then jump across to this kind of little game section here. Let's get rid of the rain real quick so we can keep on viewing. There we go, nice and sunny day. Jumping back across here, we have the trampoline bounce, upcharge attraction. Here, Busch Gardens has largely started to get away from these types of attractions, but at the time that this park was built, that was still a definite thing, and it's a nice little detail. I love all the little shops and gift shops and stalls here, and another one of these carts, a little bit of variation this time. Really great detail throughout. And then we have the Royal Barge, the swinging ship on this side. Nice look to it with the custom scenery on either side. A little bit of shame that the ride doesn't run. It would be neat to have that going back and forth, but the theming makes up for that. It's a good look, realistic looking ride as well. Nice covered queue wrapping around as well. Before we get to the coaster, we'll stop here over at Andaman Falls. This is a log flume that takes a pretty good inspiration from the Busch Gardens Tampa log flume as well. It has the traditional double inline station that a lot of the early Arrow flumes had. Just the one side working, which is fine. It's a little complicated of a hack to do both sides, and kind of unnecessary, I think. Nice winding here through the pretty lush landscaping. Got some bamboo covered in there, and the very Southeast Asia landscape. the object limit prevented Rob from getting probably as lush as he would have wanted, but it still looks good overall. So we've got 2 lift hills here. We've got the first one, a little bit of a mid drop here, some great supports with the cross beam up underneath, and then this final lift here. There's a lot of ways to do these drops, whether it's the water slide track or the splash boats track or whatever you may want to do. But I think this one looks nice. I think that's probably the best looking of them. I like the footers here buried underneath. I like that the flume doesn't actually touch the water. It's properly raised up like most flumes are. Not necessarily all of them, but it is most of them will have that sort of look to it. Really great sculptural piece here. Excellently done as you go underneath of the entry canopy here. All these buildings kind of have these great little spaces up underneath the coverings. Triangular Q covers, kind of standard, little bit plain, but it's certainly realistic. It's something that would be done. Really good use of the monster truck ride here for the roof. It's a Southeast Asian looking type roof. And we have our Aero coaster here, an appropriate number of trains at 7. According to the README, this is the first coaster in the park that opened with the park back when it had first come up. This one is based on Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. So we've got this flat curve here, excellent support work overall, and a pretty big drop here down all the way to the water underneath of the loops, which is a neat little touch up into a flat corner, and then 2 loops back to back. Feels very appropriate for an Aero coaster. A lot of kind of dynamic turning here and things like that. Mid-course brake run. It's right on the shorter end, so probably could have hit or missed on the brake run. It's not necessary that it be there, but a lot of the early Aero coasters did have that kind of touch to it. So not surprising at all. We've got the sliding transfer track here, long enough for the train, and the maintenance bay also long enough for the train. So nice touches there that we've covered everything as well. So let's move along. We are going to slide over into Japan next. So we can either cross this nice red bridge here or go around on this kind of wood path. On the backside, we have a river that runs through the whole park over in here to the main lake and then back out the other side. So it's nice work throughout. I like the gradient landscape here that really gives it some depth, gives it a little bit of darker coloring in here. It's a good look overall. Our sky ride, actually, that we've been following along, touches down here in Japan, so you can come into the park and take a ride into the back of the park right off the bat. So some great Japanese architecture here, a lot more muted color palette, a lot of blacks, some grays and whites, and then just some kind of pops of accent from a color standpoint, like these bridges. Here is the entrance to the coaster on this torii gate, across the bridge, around this pagoda, and through some of the other areas. So I think what I like about this is just kind of how much the coaster weaves around the space. It just looks good overall. It's a little bit weird that the coaster is over here the coaster entrance is over here, considering the coaster station is over here. It's a little bit of an odd placement considering that you cross underneath of the main path to get to it. Generally, your parks from a recognition standpoint want to put the entrance next to the station, but the nice thing is really this station and a lot of this whole area is just kind of buried in the back where you can't actually see it. Just sort of an interesting choice, but so it's a good look overall. So here we are crossing underneath the main path, queuing through underneath all these trellis elements, and then a pretty sizable station here. And then we have this this kind of fortress castle-looking facade here on the front of this pretty large show building here. If we peek inside, we can see the coaster's got a first half that's pretty well covered inside. It's all an interior launch thing. So the ride says it's from Mach. It's definitely based off of Verbolten at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, which is a Zero double launched ride that starts with an interior section as well. So here we go, taking that rolling launch up inside the building with a couple of helixes, using the overall elevation there. Nice thing is the landscape is sunk in a little bit, so we can still get some elevation changes, but the building isn't just crazy massive. It still fits within the scale of the overall. So here we are popping out of the building, dive underneath that first drop, give the queue line a nice little peek here before we take on launch number 2 through this building, up and around, and then up into this Cheetah Hunt-esque tower before we dive back on down and do a couple more elements here, coming around a couple little airtime hills, wrap around. We're going to skirt over top of the queue line, go underneath the launch track, jump it again, and then a nice break here in this garden area. Really liking these pink trees here, the kind of cherry blossom-esque trees. So one note, as I have on the coaster, and again also noting this really great water splash underneath the launch, typically when a coaster manufacturer does a launch coaster, the first element after the launch wants to be the highest one, just in case, for whatever reason, it might roll back or not have enough momentum to make it. Then we can guarantee that it's going to roll back onto the launch. So typically you wouldn't see something like this where you have this lower piece first and then this big one. But from a flow standpoint and just the overall placement of everything, this just looks great. Would be nice to have some more sections to actually see this launch, but on Verbolten, there really isn't that look either. It's all pretty well hidden except for kind of those final elements, but you still get a nice peek at this great tower here with the supports here that sort of cantilever out in a couple of places as well. So just looking through this area as a whole, we've got some really nice looking buildings. This is a great way to do a Asian type theme without using any of the typical Asian roofs. Now we'll see some of those used elsewhere, but I mean, using the metal roof, the Spanish tile roof here as well, really does everything it needs to. It just has the multiple slopes and the kind of roof ridge decoration, and then the pretty large overhangs throughout. All these buildings feel very, appropriately Japanese for this space. So this area as a whole is kind of a self-contained area before we pop back out and go elsewhere. So looking at all how this works together, there's some great little touches here, like this was a smoking area here because it's got the yellow markings. This is a restroom, and here's the water fountains here. So great little details on all of that. And some good seating area here out over the water. Just thinking through some of those vistas across to all the various parts and pieces. Couple more of the games across here, and then just a good scattering of buildings and shops and restaurants. You can kind of feel like this is almost more of the shopping district, since there's really no other rides in here aside from this massive coaster that takes up pretty much the whole space. On the back side, you have a little bit of peek here at the back of house roadway here. This is the new for 2016 coaster that we glimpsed earlier for the site markings up at the front of the park. So it will be kind of neat to see that ever updated someday, just to see what that coaster would have looked like. But now we're going to continue. We come across and cross this bridge. It's got some pretty nice structural details here. As we jump over to the next two areas, we have the Indian type area here and then the Tibet area on this side. First thing we come to is Shiva's Dance, which is an inverting swinging ship. So not only do we have the regular swinging ship here, we've got the much bigger inverting swinging ship. Again, not operable, but some really great details here, like the arm and the counterweight on the upper side here. So really, really well done overall. I think that's looking great. So we're going to start up into India first, just because I think this one is one of my favorite areas. This nice dark brown colored path, which really offsets well with the green landscaping all around, and this kind of peach architecture that becomes sort of the primary architecture in some of the spots here. Amazing restaurant here that I think kind of acts like the Crown Colony House signature dining restaurant, like you see at Busch Gardens, Tampa. Um, Another great little bridge here, diagonal on the way over, coming across this little valley. And then great little trading post here on the way into the space. First thing you get to is just this massive cobra roll framed really well around here with the landscaping. Again, sunken plants all around. Pretty lush landscape. I know this is one of the earlier areas developed in the park, so the landscaping is not surprising that it is as lush as it is. Here we have the Carousel, Maharaja's March. Excellent theming in this area. It's got that sort of intricate detailing, kind of almost like that Angkor Wat building from the Rapids ride as well, but it's really got that great kind of fine detailing. Even if it's one color, you have all this kind of shape and form work, and then you have the little accent pieces here, and then the roof colors as well. So continuing around, we get to the entrance to the ride. I'll loop back around here and see the actual entrance structure here as you go in. Would be nice to hide the sign just because you won't have the scrolling sign there, but let's jump on board since this one has moved along already. So this is Yarganath. I clicked the wrong one, so here we go. 8 cars per train, which is appropriate, and running 2 trains, although seeing the mid-course breaks, it can run 3 trains if it wants to. We have our color scheme here, kind of borrowed from Pyrenees at Parque España in Japan. It's a good look overall. I kind of like a white coaster. Looks good. So first we have our loop into an Immelman, diving out of that and into a second loop. Again, I said it matches the Pyrenees color scheme. It also kind of matches the Pyrenees and Katoon's layout. 2 loops in there with the Immelman, and then we have the Cobra roll right there. Looping through, this is a very Pyrenees element, the helix looping through the loop into the brakes, out over through that first corkscrew, wrap around, and then we have a very late 0G roll here, but it's kind of a must in an inverted coaster, I would say, is having some kind of a 0G roll somewhere. And then we wrap around up and into the brakes. On the whole, I'd say this is one of the stronger layouts in the park, if not the strongest. Let's look at the station here real quick, where we have our queue line here out on the side. And then we cross over the 0G roll here. It's a really kind of neat look as you come across. Great detailing here as well with the 3 train hold in the maintenance area, 2 kind of double stacked here, and then the one in the back. Pretty simple station, but also this is appropriate. A lot of Busch Gardens Tampa's buildings are kind of heavy timber and metal roof, and that's pretty much it. So this fits appropriately with all that. You can tell it's a little bit of an earlier B&M because of the supports. There's a lot more of them, especially on the lift hill. And the support work is done kind of really well throughout this whole thing. So definitely probably my favorite coaster in the park, and a great layout overall. You can kind of feel yourself going through all this. Lots of cool details like the trenches here and the low to the ground elements throughout. Continuing along, more spectacular architecture. The purple and red is a really nice combo here. And then we get into this sort of tiger trek, little walk through. You can go all the way back through here. There's some glass areas here looking down. Animal habitats are part of the experience here at a Busch Gardens park. You've got Tiger A and Tiger B. It would be kind of neat if we named those, but the exhibit is done really well, where you have the lower portion here, kind of hiding those fences with the underneath of the theming here as sort of the back of house care facility for the animals. Water up close, nice little waterfall throughout, and a lot of little enrichment pieces here, like the logs across the wood or across the water and everything else. So again, cool detailing throughout, really well done. Then we also have our nice little picnic area here on that side. So this actually loops us around and heads us into Tibet on the opposite side. So we'll get in here and take a look at all of this. We've got the prayer flags going across the pathway and the queue lines in a lot of places here, looking good overall. Right here we have Mandala, the Scrambler ride from Eli Bridge. And then looking up underneath here, we also have Everest, the 4D experience. What I like about this is it looks like an older part of the park, so like a maybe an early theater that was part of this park, but was since repurposed, rethemed into this area. And it has this mansard-ish roof with the big roof here and then the little pop-up here on the side. Lots of good theming throughout again, and a lot of seats here. So kind of a nice feature here with the water splash on the coaster is the seating right next to it. This guy's probably a little bit close, so there's a good chance they're going to be getting wet. So maybe just a little closer than they ought to have been, but it's a good look overall. These guys are a little safer, but also have that great view of the drop here coming down. Once again, the architecture is very location specific and appropriate. Lots of little details here, like Yak Snacks, where we have our queue line that wraps around and in here. Also the gift shop in here as well. I don't know if it was an object related thing or not, that there is no pathing underneath of this. I kind of like to think that it wasn't. I kind of think that it feels themed and part of the whole thing to be that. So user can make up their own mind on that. Another great sculpture here at the entrance to the coaster. So we got a great little plaza here that's wrapped up together and kind of creates an entrance for this ride. Once again, a nice entry portal here. I would have probably gotten rid of the scrolling sign just to make it look a little neater. Looks like this no entry sign is maybe a holdover from when the park was getting built, but no matter either way. So this is Garuda, which is a B&M vertical drop coaster along the lines of Shikra or Griffin at the real parks. Got our nice kind of switchback queue going in here. This is one of the more recent rides in the park, you can imagine, just based off of the real thing. So there's a fair chance that this queue is appropriate with that, because it's a little less themed, a little more switchback than normal, which would fit that. So looking at this, he has used the 10 across cars for this choice. Griffin is the only B&M vertical drop coaster that uses the 10 across. All the others use 8 and 6. So this is sort of a one-of-a-kind deal. We have a nice theme here. Immelman first, and after the drop, which is pretty standard stuff, coming up into the brake run, diving underneath of the water splash area before we hit it. It's a shame we can't actually do the water splash animation on that side, but you kind of get the picture and can expect that yourself. Good look though overall. It's a layout that feels appropriate for this. B&M vertical drop kind of layouts are often sort of formulaic. They don't do a whole heck of a lot, but it's a unique design, custom layout, and looks good overall. And then lots of great detailing here. So one of the things that I like are the diagonal catwalks that go up and then wrap around the catwalks here before the whole break, and then some of these really excellent supports that are doubled up to make it look a little bit thicker since there are less supports. I mean, you take Jagannath, for example, that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we'll call it 6 supports on the lift hill, versus this guy that's got 1, 2, 3 and is arguably a little taller. So you can see the more modern take on the B&M coaster, and a good look overall. Staircase is a little busy, but the thing is, there's really no other way to do that. Well, there are other ways, but I think this one looks just fine. And some nice little theming here with the fencing that wraps all around. I like, too, the maintenance area here where he's done the extra wide doors for this and widened up the entire thing just to make it feel appropriate there. I mean, the thing is, according to the game, this takes up only 1 tile, but you can kind of clearly see that it takes up 1.5 and a half, so almost 2 across the entire thing. So it really needs to have that extra space here. I like the use of the blue on the rocks here. Makes it feel a little bit snowy and has that sort of Himalayan type texture throughout. And then also this exit path going over top of the initial drop up into the lift is a nice little touch. So now we'll wrap around to the back side of the Tibet area, where we go across this, or underneath of the turnaround here that wraps this building. It's kind of a cool look overall. A little bit claustrophobic here, where we have the one clear pathway and then this gift shop here. So it's a little bit tight. You can definitely tell here's where some of the object limits suffered, but that's really not a huge issue, I don't think, because it's really back of house type things. It's not a park centric thing. You're able to finish most of the park proper, which I appreciate on the whole. Here we have a nice flying carpet ride. Again, static, but really well themed. You get the 4 counterweights here. And the kind of overall look that feels realistic but is correct. It looks good overall, and it's great. Over here we have our drop tower, name of which I will not try and pronounce because I probably won't get it right. Nice color look on here, and then a custom cap. The roto drop look overall. It does not specify what manufacturer this is. Could very well be Intamin, could also be Mosier Rise, as this looks rather similar to Mach Tower at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. That was Mosier's largest and one of their only towers of that size. I know it had a lot of trouble, so not to say that they wouldn't have doubled up on a second one, but most likely not. So here are the last couple buildings. Again, the reuse of these little canopies. This is a pretty standard thing that you'd see the same exact cart structure, this little maybe 2x1 here, and then this little L-shaped one. It's not surprising that you would see those reused elsewhere in the park, just with different colors on them. It makes sense to have a couple of the same thing, and then just has a different skin for where it sits in the park. So now we're going to cross over into China. We cross this bridge, which has some really nice detail here, where we have the fencing and the all the landscape, the crawling vines on this that hides the view of the service road that goes underneath of it. So it's a nice touch that you generally don't want to see that. Busch Gardens Tampa has something similar. And we head out here to the health center. So this is part of the animal portion of Busch Gardens. So Busch Gardens Tampa has a front-facing animal care center where you can go watch animal procedures and kind of see the general checkups of various animals in the park's care. So a nice little detail here. And we come across to this side here, and we have the stables. All of the Busch Gardens parks initially did have the Clydesdale horses. Busch Gardens Williamsburg still does, but Tampa no longer does. But this is a great stables area. It's a big building. You know, when you look at the whole of the park and kind of pull back, this building kind of jumps out at you among all of the other ones, just because it's that kind of bright red roof, and it's pretty standard across the entire thing. But I mean, it's realistic. It looks good. Maybe some dormers here to break it up would have helped a little bit, but on the whole, it's a nice looking ride, or building, I should say. Block building here that didn't quite get finished, but there's some stable on the side, so you kind of have this animal habitat on this side with the doors here. Same thing with this guy as well, just on the other side. So really, this is sort of the animal-centric part of the park here, and you know, the main spot of all that. Although you do have some animal habitats throughout elsewhere, like the tigers that we saw earlier. So coming around here, the Chinese architecture that you see is a little bit different. So unlike the Japanese architecture, we're using the actual Asian type roofs here. Again, more muted colors, but the thing is, I think there's a want to fall into all Chinese architecture looking like this, sort of Forbidden City yellow, red, orange color. But a lot of Chinese architecture really has this look too, especially the traditional, with the whites and the reds and the blacks as well. So it's architecturally distinct from Japan, and I think Rob's done a nice job pulling that off here. You have the lanterns over top of the pathway to give it some different colors, but some really nice work here on this gate and entrance to this shop and stall area throughout. So we can jump across the bridge here and look at the Suzhou splashdown. The queue line is over on this side. We have this great looking little pagoda scenery object. This wraps around, comes up, and does its double down drop and big splash here. These guys are going to get clobbered by that splash, so that's probably the splash's own area. And then another little pagoda here on the other side. Good choice of the name, since Suzhou in China is known for its canals and water, so it feels appropriate there as well. And here we've got our theater. So this is the Golden Dragon Acrobats. Again, there's great lanterns over top, pathway coming up. So you got this great kind of marquee look, tall flags that drop down, and then this whole facade really screening this kind of generic box shape on the side. I like that it's not entirely invisible, that you can still see it, but that an attempt has been made to screen it, such as these plants here. And then we have our gate coming into the space on this side. Then here's kind of typical Chinese type small buildings. I like this little outdoor theater space that's on the front. You can almost assume that there's some kind of a main show in here, and then maybe some little shows every 45 minutes or an hour out here in this space that's delineated with the separate pathway. So I kind of like that design overall. Here's one more animal area. We have pandas, which pandas in zoo habitats are all on loan from China. China owns all the world's pandas. That's something to note if you ever see one in a zoo. So we have this nice red pathway wrapping around, nice little glass area here looking down over top of this space. I like the water here underneath, and just the nice little detailing here, and then also the inside space on this side. Just outside, you have this sort of covered splash pad for kids. It's close to the kids area right over here, but it's also a nice little detail as well. On the back side of this building, you've got a couple of water sprayers here for the ride itself. So a nice little interactive thing there if you find them, since they're kind of hidden here in the back. But presumably once you go through this gift shop, perhaps, then you'll find those on the other side. Here we have Topsy-Turvy Tea Time underneath a nice little green canopy here. Good look overall, nice use of the custom skin on that ride that can look a little garish, but is done pretty well. But now we'll move to the signature piece of this area, even though most of the ride doesn't spend any time in the area. We already said this is sort of that Forbidden City type architecture with the yellows and the reds and the oranges, so it's pretty bright and in your face. This is Feng Huang. So this is a B&M hypercoaster, 9 cars per train and 3 trains, so that is appropriate for the type. So right now we're waiting for this guy to take off. We're gonna let him go because we want to go ahead and see this thing. I like the different colors in the trains. This one's orange, this one's yellow. I can imagine the other one maybe red or here, a different color of orange. So it's a good look overall. We've got the catwalks on either side, which is something that the early B&Ms had. The other ones did not. And also the later ones do not. And a shallow lift hill, so 30 degrees, with this kind of extended drop here on the front. So we know why he had the extra time in there, so it doesn't stop here, and we can wait for this guy to clear that block break, because it looks like then that the block break on the mid-course must not be active. This is one of the longer coasters that I've seen, and it most likely needed that momentum to get back. So we've got the standard hills here. In diagonal, it's a little difficult when you have the shallow and the steep. It almost looks too stretched, but either way, great turnaround here, and the fully underground tunnel here. The nice detail of the trim brakes here on either side. Note that the trim brakes are heading up the hill, which is appropriate. They want to be heading up the hill and not down the hill. Through that mid-course brake run, which which is not actually active, which we found. A couple more hills here. This little ramped hill, a la Apollo's Chariot. And then we take another one here, down along the water, and then up at the top. So I kind of like this little straight section here, and this little valley, so you have the overall height that you've been kind of sitting at, where you start here at +5, and drop down a little more here at +2, and then at the lowest you're here down at -2. So it's kind of a nice little triple step down over those couple of hills as we get back to the station area. We have 2 of the maintenance areas. There are 3 trains, but 2 is acceptable. We can definitely store one of the trains here in the station itself. I like this sloping curved queue cover across the entire thing for the exit path on the ride. And then on the whole, these queue buildings are nice throughout. Now you really can't see much of this ride except from the pathway here, and the nice thing is that it dominates the space so well that you've got this great little peak here once you get to the other side of the bridge looking across at the drop. And then over here on this side here, you can take a peek at the hills in the back and the turnaround here. It was kind of like the ride kind of stuck here in the back because that was where the space was to build the ride, so that's where it all goes. So our last little area here is the kids area. So we have the Sesame Street kind of Festival of Fun, which is what he's called it. First we have Elmo's Dragon Dance, which is a zero coaster here. This looks like the 0190 Plus model, which has a curve drop and then 2 opposing helixes back to the station. Pretty simple ride, 1 cycle each on that, but that is correct for the what the kids areas in the Busch Gardens parks are doing. Couple other little nice rides here. We got the Frog Hopper. We have the miniature disco here. Discos do come in 3 sizes. There's the junior size. There's the Rock and Tug, which is the kiddie size, the regular size, and then the mega disco. Both of those other last 2 are more thrill rides than not. And then right here we have this great 2x2 rides as well. So you've got the Slimy Swinger, you have the Grouchy Carousel, and then you also have Ernie's Ducky Boats. What I like about this is that it is a kids area, and it has the Sesame Street theme, but it's got the Chinese overlay, so it fits with the Chinese area here as a whole. Especially this climbing structure with the slide through it and the festival dragon throughout. The traditional Chinese architecture is here, but with all these bright colors like the maroons and the bright blues and the purples as well. It really is a fun overall look with a lot of colors, a lot of kind of in-your-face brightness, but it fits. And I mean, it's a kids area, so it feels appropriate for that kind of a space. But outside of that, we cross the bridge here over that river on the way in, and that brings us back here to Istanbul to wrap up the park. So on the whole, there's a lot to this park. It's a big park for one. Has a lot of areas. We have Istanbul, Southeast Asia, Japan, India, Tibet, China, and the kids area within China. And they're all pretty sizable areas with a lot of architecture, a lot of rides, a lot of attractions. Cover all kind of the main rides pretty well, and a number of good coasters. We're really kind of lopsided coaster-wise on this side with the 3 B&Ms, and then the Mock Rides launch coaster here in the back. But, he's taking steps to rectify that here with these survey markers for this new coaster on this side. Good variety of flat rides, too. Some really excellent custom flat rides. At the time that this park was built, custom flat rides were a big thing like that. I think we've since moved to seeing a lot more of those rides, still custom, but now operating. But I can't fault it for the time, because that was really what was going on with these kind of rides. Great kind of walkway throughout around the lake here, and then throughout this space. There's enough pathways that kind of crisscross throughout, but there's definitely a defined loop of path here, and then kind of the larger loop of path that covers through all the different areas at once as you come come through the space. So you can definitely feel that path hierarchy. What you don't want to do is get into too many paths that crisscross every which way, like a fairground park, for example, or like a seaside park maybe where there's just rides plopped down. You want to be paying attention to the pathways that you do as far as throughput goes, getting guests to go past the rides, getting guests to go past the gift shops more accurately for those revenue opportunities. But I think it's done well here. There's definitely a lot probably more path than you would see at a Williamsburg or Tampa park, but on the whole, done well. Other great details here, like the 3-point challenge basketball game and a couple of those other game challenges throughout, but a lot of nice detailing, nice kind of sense of place, arrival signage. I like that all the coasters have some kind of a main ID type sign here as you go into the ride itself. And then all these little pathway elements, these little carts and things. This is common. I mean, it feels like there's a lot of them, but it's really not. I mean, this is appropriate for a park of this size and a park of this company to see those kind of carts throughout this entire space. So it feels right. There's a lot of activation of the pathway, so it never feels like there's a lot of dead space throughout the area. So I think it looks good overall. I'm also liking this little island here that this guy knocks down on, so there's no points where this ride sits into the water. But that is all that I have for this park here. So hopefully you enjoyed the Busch Gardens Asia by Robbie92 review, part of our MasterClass series where we go through and look at some of those best of the best parks that have been released on New Element. This being one of the highest scoring parks of all time, and in my opinion, one of the best. So congratulations to Robbie, and in the meantime, if you have any other parks you'd like reviewed or you'd like me to take a look at, feel free to send a note to myself at Cedar Point 6 at the New Element forums, or subscribe and leave a comment here on the YouTube page. So until next time, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the park.